What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I'm going to be talking about the one and only Tesla stock and what you should be looking out for the future. I'm also going to break down what's going on with SPY and the QQQ and Nvda and Amazon and many other tickers out there as I break down what's happening with the debt ceiling, what's going on with the employment data coming out for tomorrow, and what's happening with the news affecting Tesla and the markets moving forward. Before I break anything down about all of this information, though, before I talk about what's happening to Tesla's share price, what you should be watching for tomorrow, I do have to mention a couple of things before starting. Firstly, I am not a financial planner. Make sure you take none of this as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. And the last thing is, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed up to 10 free stocks, each worth up to $2,000. And the best part is, any could be a free Tesla share. The offer ends very soon, in just a couple of weeks, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, Tesla was up 1.76% for the day. In the morning, I told you guys that the technicals were not looking that great in the very beginning, but it wasn't very easy to call anything like that because we would get a big reaction to the PMI report later on. And then I mentioned both the bullish and bearish cases to watch for depending on the PMI report. To start us off, we were looking kind of choppy though, and we did see Tesla drop very dramatically in the very beginning alongside SPY and many other tickers like that. Tesla hit 199, then it got a nice bounce, and it was very choppy in the very beginning. The reason why Tesla was dropping in the beginning is because some negative news came out involving Elon Musk. Musk has done a great job running Tesla, in my opinion, but there were some things the market and many of these investors were expecting that did not happen. Elon Musk ended up not unveiling the new version of the Model 3, and Tesla sold off a bit in the morning because of this. Now, Elon Musk ended up just taking a flight from Shanghai all the way up to Texas, and he just ended up doing not what many investors were anticipating. And because of these expectations, Tesla sold off in the very beginning, but it wasn't really the end of the world because Elon Musk mentioned some very positive things about the relationship between the US and China and why he's still confident it's going to work out for Tesla moving forward. Now, that was some pretty good news in the beginning, at least from Elon Musk's end. It just didn't meet everyone's expectations. However, as time went on, the PMI report came out, and then Tesla started pumping. And then I mentioned to you guys that if we broke this like 204 to 205 resistance, we're likely going to see Tesla make its way all the way up to the 207s. And 207.5 specifically was where Tesla saw some resistance. Once Tesla reached this level, I released a second video and talked about some news that came out involving the Senate. And then I told you guys the zone to watch for would be around the 209s if Tesla managed to break 207 to 207.5. And Tesla ended up spiking around 209.8. Then it cooled off just a little bit and closed just above previous resistance, which became support at 207.5, which is very close to where Tesla closed. Tesla is currently a little bit green in the after hours, getting very close to 208, and it's gaining lots of strength as time goes on. As for SPY, the same thing happened. It sold off a little bit in the morning, then it got a nice bounce after the PMI report came out, and it confirmed many of these bullish signals I was talking about, right? If we broke 420, that would be a very bullish signal. And also other levels below that, we managed to break all of them. And we held above 420 very, very nicely. And then that's a very, very good signal for us to test the previous highs. And we went all the way up to almost 423. Once again, looking very, very nice. Lots of bullish strength is here on the hourly, on the 4-hour, and the daily charts. But the real question is, will we continue to pump like this tomorrow? The answer is most likely the odds favor it, but it's going to depend heavily, right, on the data that's coming out and some news from the Senate. And I want to talk about that first before breaking down any of the charts. Now for SPY, let me just mention that we have a very important day for the options chain tomorrow. We have about or just under 500,000 of the puts, not the puts, the calls expiring tomorrow. And then we have about 1.3 plus million puts expiring. All right, so a 2.8 put to call ratio. The majority of positions expiring tomorrow are puts. And you have to remember that when a lot of these individuals are buying these puts or institutions are buying the puts, someone is selling them on the opposite end and taking a long position, and that's going to be the market makers. On top of that, the market makers hedge, and because they're properly hedged, they're prepared for anything. But the market makers would favor causing as much pain as possible to whatever position is over leveraged. And right now, that's the put side. So if I was a market maker, I would either hold the market close to where we are right now, or I would pump the market even harder to squeeze these shorts. And the odds favor that, but like I said before, it depends on some data, which I'm going to mention in a couple of minutes. Now, some more data came out. Dell announced earnings. They beat on EPS, they beat on revenue. And part of the reason why the market is still at these high levels is because earnings were nowhere near as bad as so many people were anticipating, right? Tesla had pretty good earnings. It's just that their margins weren't the best, but Apple did relatively well. Google/Alphabet did well. Microsoft killed it. Nvda absolutely destroyed their earnings. They killed it, and the thing went bananas. And that's part of why the market is still holding these levels. On top of this, initial jobless claims came out pretty decent overall, very close to expectations, but this did cause the market to sell off just a little bit because overall it wasn't very, very hot, right? And the market wants more pain from the jobs sector because this is what the Fed is looking for. We don't want these jobs numbers to be too hot. We want them to get weaker and weaker as time goes on. That's exactly what the Fed Harker ended up saying. So Harker from the Fed said some important things. He said that we could get a pause as soon as June. He mentioned other important things about how he doesn't see a recession happening this year. He sees unemployment reaching 4.4% and many other things like that. Now, I mentioned more about his quotes in my previous video if you're interested in hearing him. Most of what he said was not like too crazy or out of the ordinary. The biggest thing he said was a potential pause is possible for June, but he promised that he can't guarantee, I'm sorry, he can't promise that that's going to be the final rate hike nonetheless. Now, for data for tomorrow, there are two very big things coming out. 1 hour before the market opens, we have the unemployment rate data coming out, non-farm payrolls, the labor force participation rate. We have governmental payrolls, manufacturing payrolls, and just lots of jobs numbers, basically. This is going to cause a very big move from the markets, and we want unemployment to be very close to expectations, if not a little bit higher. We do not want unemployment to be way too low because that incentivizes the Fed to be more hawkish, right? And if unemployment is still too low, this means aggregates demand in America could still be high for goods, which means we could still see some signs of high inflation. Yes, supply chains play a big role in other factors as well, but so does unemployment. This is why it's very important for the Fed's monetary policy. All right, so make sure you watch those numbers very carefully before the market opens. Now, I also mentioned to you guys that I'm not giving financial advice, but I sold the majority of my like trading positions, not my like shares in companies. I think some people misinterpreted that. I'm holding Tesla shares long term, and Apple and many other stocks. But for my trading accounts, I did liquidate almost all of them, basically everything. I'm not holding any options overnight because I don't know what's going to happen with the unemployment numbers, and it could have an effect on how we open going into tomorrow. So I'm just managing risks and being very patient, right? You have to be patient even through these big runs. At least that's just my view. But if you're willing to hold calls on like Tesla and all these things, betting on it just continuing to pump, it very much could do that. But just know it's going to depend on the data too. So we have to be careful. Even though things are looking bullish from the technicals, be very, very careful and be mindful of the data that's coming out tomorrow morning. That's your choice. You could maybe make a ton of money doing that. That's just your choice. I simply am doing what I deem to be important for risk management. But, anyways, going back into the data. So, once again, 1 hour before the market opens, the data is coming out. I will talk about this in the pre market tomorrow. And finally, this is going to be massive. We have the debt ceiling bill. So, if you don't know how this works, we have a polycentric system. Biden and McCarthy have proposed this bill. They came up with an agreement. The House passed it yesterday. Now, the Senate is going to be going through it. The US Senate is going to be looking at the bill. They may be voting on it as soon as tonight, according to Chuck Schumer. If he is correct and they do vote and pass this could be very bullish news for the stock market. If they continue to delay it, the market may continue to be choppy for an extended period of time, maybe just range trade for a bit, and it could pump it based off some other factor, but this wouldn't be like the super bullish news to pump it as much. And maybe something happens tomorrow. Maybe we get a deal or not. Maybe we get them to, pass the deal. We'll have to wait and see. But for now, be on the lookout for the news about the Senate. They could pass it as soon as tonight if they do vote on it. And I think they should do it as soon as possible because McCarthy reiterated the dates that Janet Yellen set as June 5th. That's very, very important stuff. Now, anyways, when it comes to Tesla, let's break down some other very important pieces of information. So right here, the news has come out that Tesla has been liquidating their Model 3 ahead of the next launch of the new generation vehicles. We're seeing more and more price cuts and discounts for the Model 3 and the Model Y, but more towards the Model 3. There's another $1,200 discount right here for Tesla. That's once again going to help them boost their sales. I'm really hoping it helps them out. And that's very important during a time like this because when you look at the Model 3 inventory levels, they're starting to skyrocket. And that's not a good sign because we're approaching the summer and they should start dropping here. Instead, they're continuing to go up. Why? Because a lot of people don't want to take liens. They don't want to take loans during times like this with these high interest rates. That's hurting Tesla. And Elon Musk described this as another cost for Tesla. And he said it's not Tesla's fault, but it is what it is. This is why investors were hoping that Elon Musk would advertise the Model 3, and he ended up not doing it. And I'm not trying to criticize him when I say that. It's really his choice. Maybe he didn't even plan on doing it, and it was just a rumor that spread on so many mainstream articles. But anyways, we want to see something new being done to the Model 3 because this is not good for Tesla. Inventory levels are very high. The new version of it may lead to more sales coming, so maybe this is going to start dropping. I'm hoping for that. But we'll just have to wait and see. Now, on top of this, there was new news that came out that the Model Y, not the 3, the Y is just killing it in Norway right now. You can see right here, if you look at the levels of the most sales between January and May, the Model Y did over 2,691. The VW ID4 did about a little bit over 700. So Tesla absolutely killed it. And they've done an absolutely incredible job. They're killing it. They're very popular. And the Model Y is continuing to be bought up in the USA. Inventory levels are just dropping and dropping. They're currently just under about 150. Once again, very good news for Tesla. We're continuing to sell the Model Y like crazy, and people just love this vehicle all over the world. This is great news for them. It is offsetting some of the negative effects of the Model 3 inventory levels being that high, but we'll have to wait and see what this causes for deliveries and earnings. Now, for volume, Tesla had 147 million today, well above average, doing very well. I'm very impressed by this. Tesla got a lot of buying pressure today. People started to buy. Algo started buying once it held above 200 very nicely after the initial drop. That's a very good sign for Tesla. On top of that, there was a lot of buying pressure that came in as Tesla's outperforming the market, at least to some degree. And overall, there's nothing new from analysts. Just know Tesla tends to not be as strong on Fridays historically. We're only green 49% of the time. This does not guarantee anything about the future, though. It's just worth noting. And June historically tends to be a strong month for Tesla. We're green about 77% of the time in June. But be very careful because there are other factors that will affect how the whole market performs, which are not normal in the markets, right? We have the Fed having the FOMC meeting, we have inflationary numbers, CPI all coming out. So many things are still coming out, like the jobs numbers that still will affect Tesla. But if we exclude all of that, historically Tesla tends to do well during June. On top of that, Tesla is notorious for being green during the second hour of the day. So, like today, for example, Tesla started taking off during the second hour, and it became much stronger during, I believe it was the second to last hour. Tesla became even stronger. This was around between, I think it was like 2 o'clock p.m., 1 to 2 p.m. Eastern time is when Tesla started doing much better. So, around this period, that's when Tesla really started pushing today. On top of this, if you look at the short interest on Tesla starting to decline a bit, we're starting to see more shorts closing their positions, and this is helping Tesla as well. So lots of good stuff for Tesla so far. Now let's break down these charts. So please keep in mind, we have a lot of big stuff coming out for tomorrow involving the debt ceiling and involving all of the data for the unemployment numbers. For that reason, I can't really predict these charts perfectly. I'm just going to be very careful. We are looking more bullish from a technical standpoint, but I want to break down the bullish and bearish cases and then talk about what's more likely. All right, so if we're bullish tomorrow on SPY, okay, we're going to be watching this heavy resistance at 422.9 to 422.99, very close to 423 basically. If it breaks and holds this, if we could get a very clean breakup of 423, SPY is going to fly most likely. It has the potential to go up to about between 425 to 426, more towards 426. If it breaks that, the next major resistance is going to be 427.5, then 430 is going to come. But the odds are greatly favoring it pushing up to at least 426 in my opinion if we hold above 423. However, let's just say the numbers aren't too good and we don't get too much bullish news from the Senate and something bad happens, hypothetically, right? Uh, the next support to watch for on SPY is going to be basically 420, very basic, but that's going to be the next major one. There is some support at 421, but the really strong one should be 420. We're going to see a lot of bulls trying to step in and algos try to defend this area. If 420 fails us, then we have 419.39, which is where the 50 EMA happens to be right now. Could be a little bit higher by tomorrow. And then if that fails us, we have this imbalance at 418, followed by the 200 EMA on the hourly time frame around 416.8. Overall, I don't expect us to drop that low, but I am leaning more in the direction of us pushing more based off this bullish MACD and also based off this current trend. There's a bearish divergence potentially developing on the RSI, so we may cool off just a little bit by the pre-market. Maybe it just happens right before the market opens, but then there's always potential for us to push more if we get a good piece of news from the Senate and if the numbers look very good for unemployment for the markets. Overall, I am leaning in that direction because of the insane amount of puts expiring. We have about 1.3 plus million puts expiring. The odds favor us trying to squeeze, but I'm always open-minded just in case because of the data. For Tesla, it looks pretty nice right now, very bullish looking trend. It has been cooling off near the end of the day, but it's still doing fine. Looking at the trend, it is cooling off on the RSI, which is completely normal. If Tesla's really bullish, okay, watch resistance. It's currently holding 207.5, so watch resistance around 208.5. There's some small resistance there. The strong resistance is going to be between 209.8 to about 210 now. That's going to be the next very important level to watch for. If it breaks 210, okay, if it manages to break and hold it, it could go flying to 212.5, then 214 on Tesla. 214 is going to be a little bit more significant. If it manages to break this, we have some major resistance right here to about basically the mid 216s to about 217.8. There's a supply zone up here, and Tesla's gotten rejected here many times in the past, all the way up to 217 if it does squeeze that hard. That's a very bullish case, but don't forget we have to break 210 first before getting there. If we're bearish, if some bad news comes out hypothetically, make sure you watch support. First off, 207.5 to 207 flat are going to be supports for Tesla. If we break below 207, the next major support is going to be around 205 to 204. Specifically, 205 should try to hold Tesla. And if we break below this major support, then we have to go back down to those levels 202, then 201.09, which is where the 50 EMA is, maybe a little bit higher than that by tomorrow morning, followed by 200 flat. We have to watch these levels very, very carefully. I am leaning more bullish though. I think it's more likely they're going to try to squeeze shorts. Market makers are going to hold us up and the market's going to try to continue going because there's not much weakness in the chart, next to no weakness. The chart's looking very strong still, and there's a good chance Tesla's going to continue pumping. Okay, so I think the odds favor that, but I'm always going to be open-minded because I'm not a fortune teller. I don't know what the unemployment numbers are truly going to be, and I just want to remain open-minded. For Ford, if we're bullish, we're going to be watching 12.2 followed by 12.53 followed by 12 points. This is like 12.7 5 to about $13. For bearish, we're going to be watching $12 flat and 11 point, what is this, 11.8, which is where the 200 happens to be. And then it could go down to about 11.5 after that. I'm leaning more bullish though, since so far we're holding up quite nicely and the market may dictate it. On the QQQ, if we're bullish, okay, we're going to be watching for 353 to 354 as resistance. This is going to be a little bit strong, so the QQQ is going to have to fight to break it. If it breaks 354, we're going to fly to 355.5 around that zone, followed by 358 to about 360. If we are bearish on the triple Q, it could make its way all the way down. Well, first it has to break below 352. We're just barely holding above it. Then we have to watch 350, then 348.69, which is where the hourly 50 EMA happens to be, then 346. Watch both support and resistance levels. I am leaning more bullish though, thanks to the data I'm talking about, all the puts expiring, and everything else I just mentioned earlier. I'm hoping the Senate gives us some good news anyways. What else is interesting is the HYG has this gap up here. If it does push to fill this gap, this could be a bullish signal for the markets. Typically, that would tell us that the bonds traders are still buying in this market. They're still holding. They're not giving up just yet. That would be a good sign if we do continue to pump. But if we're bearish, we have to watch support at the 50 EMA. We need to hold this to remain bullish. If we break below it, we could come all the way back down into the 73s, and that would be bearish. But for now, it's not really doing that. For Neo has a bullish divergence developing, the odds favorite trying to push for 7.8 and potentially almost $8 if we do manage to break and hold 7.65. But the problem with Neo is deliveries were not the best, so I'm going to be open-minded. And you have to remember that the next major support is going to be closer to about 7.4, then about 7.25, then $7 flat. I am leaning a little bit more bullish thanks to this bullish setup on the RSI and the MACD. But once again, I'm always open-minded because of the data and because deliveries were not the best. For the Nasdaq, if we're bullish, we could pump to about 13,250, then potentially even higher than that. If we're bearish, we could get a retest of the 50 EMA around this 12,863 zone. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish. It may come down first before trying to continue pushing, but there's no true sign of this thing breaking down. We also have a potential bullish cross on the hourly time frame on the MACD. That tends to be a bullish signal on the Nasdaq, so we'll have to see how this develops. It is still looking a little bit more bullish though. SPX, the same thing. If it breaks the high of the day and holds it, we could fly to about 4250. Then we could get closer to 4260. Then all the way up to 4275 and then 4300. Those are some resistance levels on SPX. For support, don't forget about 4200 flat, followed by 4184, which is where the 50 happens to be. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish. I think it may cool off a little bit, maybe gap down first and then try to continue to push because I did see a potential divergence developing. It may cool off first and then try to push up, but that's going to depend on if it could break the high of the day. If it breaks it, we're going to likely push up quite nicely. If not, I'd be careful. The VIX is down over 12%. If it's down more than 10%, that tends to tell us that the VIX is going to bounce either 1 or 2 trading days afterwards. For now, there's no sign of a bounce, so I'm going to be open-minded. But I'm always prepared for anything because of the fact that the VIX is, in a way, kind of like oversold. The only problem is it didn't really, show any signs of a bounce just yet, right? The next major support is around 15. Then we have, the very high 14s, which is where the bottom of this wedge would be. I'd be watching this carefully. I believe the odds favor it coming down in the market pumping causing it to come down basically. But I'm going to be open minded just in case. The dollar, it's trying to hold 13.5. If it breaks below that, then $13. Did I say 13? 103.5. Sorry about that, guys. If 103.5 fails us, then 103 flats is going to likely come. If that happens, that could be bullish for the stock market. For now, there's no sign of this thing bouncing just yet. It is oversold though, so be careful. It might bounce a little bit, then end up just retesting this low. If it breaks, that could be a bullish signal for the markets. If it continues to hold and tries to make its way up to the 200, that would be a bearish signal. But for now, there's no sign of a bounce on the dollar, so I'd be very careful with this. For Coinbase, if we're bullish, we're going to be watching 64, then 66.34. If it breaks that, then 68 is likely going to come, if not 70. For bearish, you're going to be watching support at 61.5, followed by 60, then 59.65, then the 58 zone. There's also this gap all the way down to like 57. I'm leaning more towards this thing coming down to about 61.5, then trying to bounce. That's what I'm seeing for Coinbase. It's going to be dictated by the market, so make sure you watch the data. For Apple, if we're bullish, we're going to be watching it hold 180 and make its way up to 182.5, then 185. If we're bearish, we're going to be watching 80 as support, followed by 178. And then we also have 170, the 176 zone after it breaks below the 50, if that ends up happening. So 178, 177.83, and then finally 176.5 as support for Apple. I'm leaning in the direction that it may cool off first, right over here into the 179s, then just try to continue going. And if it manages to hold 180, we could see 182.5, which could pump the market more. There's no true sign of weakness on this, so I'm not going to like talk about this thing tanking or anything, but there is a bearish divergence in the process of developing right now. It's in the process of developing. There's no guarantee it's going to play out yet. If it does end up getting the rejection, it could play out. But for now, there's no sign of that, so I'm going to remain optimistic, and I still think the odds favor upside. For Nvda, I told you guys this thing is likely going to bounce. That's what happened. If we're bullish on Nvda, watch it hold 400. If it could hold 400, it's going to make its way up to 402, then closer to the 410 area if that holds us. Then if 410 holds us, there's going to be 414 if that holds, and then we have 420. If we're bearish, it's going to make its way down to 395, 390, 388, and then 385, followed by major support at 375. I'm leaning in the direction that I may cool off just a little bit, get closer to like 395, if not 390, then try to bounce and try to continue to fight for 400. It may even hold 400 and continue going if the market squeezes. And I am leaning more bullish on it, but I'm going to be open-minded depending on the data. For Google, if we're bullish, it has to break and hold 125. If that happens, we're going to be watching the 127s, 127 to 127 to 127.75 is what you have to be watching. If we're bearish on Google, you're going to be watching support around 123. If that fails us, it's going to come down pretty low to where the 200 is around 122. I'm leaning a little bit more bullish though, because we have this very bullish looking trend that's developing on it on the PPO crossover. That's looking pretty nice, and there's a good chance it's going to test 125 if not break higher. For Amazon, if we're really bullish, we have to break 123.5. If we break it, we could get closer to 125. If we're bearish, we're going to come all the way down to 121 flat. That would be a more bearish case to watch for. Momentum is slowing down a little bit, but I am leaning a little bit more bullish on Amazon if the market pumps. It's going to likely cool off first in the pre-market, though, looking at this bearish divergence. It might cool off to about the mid 122s first, maybe a little bit lower, then try to make its way up later on. And if the market squeezes really hard, we could see Amazon make its way up to 125 plus. Finally, last but not least for Meta, let me just remind you guys there are lots of giant put sweep orders for Meta still coming in. Someone's betting that Meta is going to fall in the next like 3 to 4 weeks. I would say maybe between 2 to 3 weeks to be more exact. But if anything, I'd be careful with this because it's still holding up nicely and there's no sign of weakness despite those big orders. For Meta, there's a bearish divergence technically developing right now, but there's no sign of rejection just yet. It may cool off a little bit because it's losing some momentum at the end of the day. It may cool off and get closer to about the next support zone, and then it could try to bounce later depending on what the market does. If it cools off, watch support at 270, 269, and then 268, then 265.37. And if that fails us, we could make our way all the way down closer to 258. For bullish, 275, 277.5, and then 280 area are likely where it's going to go to. I'm leaning towards it cooling off first and then just trying to pump if the market does pump. I am leaning in that direction, but I'm always going to be open-minded depending on what happens. All right, guys. So for Tesla, let me just note that Tesla's looking pretty nice so far. I am leaning a little bit more bullish based off this trend. There's no true sign of weakness. If the market cools off a little bit in the morning, like during the pre-market, that could happen to Tesla. But if that's the case, it may gap down, and a gap down could lead to Tesla pumping later on. Then we're going to see what happens as time goes on. I know the market makers want the market to squeeze, and that could help Tesla continue to squeeze as the chart is looking relatively strong. For that reason, the odds favor Tesla continuing to pump. Make sure you watch the 210 area as resistance very carefully. If that breaks, 212.5, then 214 could come in even higher levels than that I mentioned previously. For support, don't forget about the levels I mentioned, around 207.5, followed by 207 flats, and then we have like the 205 zone. Watch all of these very carefully and get ready. Once again, guys, don't forget we have the Senate giving us some big news about the debt ceiling, and then the big numbers 1 hour before the market opens for unemployment. All right, so get ready, remain calm, cool, and collected. I am leaning more bullish despite this, but I'm always going to be open-minded, and you should be too. Non-financial advice. Last but not least, I have some merch for you guys if you're interested in buying anything like a cap, a hoodie, a tank top, or anything like that to help support the channel. And finally, don't forget about the Moomoo link. The offer ends very soon. Drop in $100 and you're guaranteed up to 10 free stocks. All right, thank you for listening. Have a great day. Get ready for tomorrow. I should be back during the pre-market. Tesla to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright despite what's happening in the market or even like some fluctuations and what the news is saying about Tesla. I'm still very bullish long term on Tesla. I'm very bullish long term for many different stocks out there. And I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you and peace out.